Okay, let's pick up again from the mitzvah. Mitzvah ashtayim b'shivim umeya. He shetzivonu Lishmoa kol Navi me'anavim. Let's aleim hashalom. Kol Navi me'anavim. It's a very strange phrase, and I pointed out last time that l'cheira the Rambam means that it's someone roy from the war. And that the Rambam, I don't know if I mentioned the Rambam in Yisodei HaTorah, Perek Zayin Halacha Zayin, v'lo kol ha'is u'moifes ma'aminin lo shu Navi, elo odom shehoyinu yodim bo b'tchilasoi. Independent of everything, we look at this person and say the following: this person is roy from the war. Like the Gemara says, whatever it is, it has to be someone who, independent of everything, who would have said, oh, that could be a Navi. It's a combination of two things. He could be brilliant, but he acts in an improper fashion, or he acts perfectly, but he doesn't have the chokhmah and the midas. Shenis'ala bohen al kol b'nei giloi. He's on his way. Is only someone who's roy to be a Navi. Navi min Navim. And then he's ma'amis mivosai, so then you have to believe him. And Akdom the Pirush Mishnayis, Kishitan Odom Shinisnabe, Kmoshi Bi'an, the Bohoy Roilo, Kloima, Shiemi Bale Achochma, Vadas, Kosh, Maskil, Klil Amidis, Hatoivais, Lafia Klal, Shetzleinu, a Navu Shira, El Al Chochom, Gibo, Voshir, it's Chochom Gibo, Bimidoisa. Im Hoyohogim. Lo kfi shetzorach v'yomesh isnabe noima lo shehiftachinu havtoches v'odianu hoidois mima sheodiach Hashem v'hu oimer in the sky kol havtoches yadanu amitas nevuasa. So then we test them, but the test is irrelevant. Someone who has the abilities clairvoyant to predict the future and doesn't have minus in nevuah, there's no elof tishmon. Now, he says, I feel, and then he tells like this. Tzivor Lishmoa kol Navi, v'la'aseis kol ma sheyitzavabod. Whatever he tells us. And that includes, I feel tzivor behepech mitzvah. Now, we pointed this out last week. Rav Sadi is of the opinion, and that's what the Rama means in the Pirush Mishnayis, Kama B'chereim, that he's that's even the best of the Chacham Yisrael thought so. They need to do something which is Mishana Minagosh Olam, and the Rama is very clear about this in the Mishnah Torah and in Pirush Mishnayis. You don't have to be Mishanim Minogosh Olam. In fact, it doesn't mention it because it's not an important thing. You just have to do something to Ma'amis Me Nevuasa. Now, I pointed out last week also, I don't understand what the difference is whether he's Mavato Mitzvah Achas or Harbe Mitzvahs. And the Ram seems to say, afilu tziva behepech mitzvah or klal mitzvahs me mitzvah elu. And this Kapach translates it, kama mitzvahs me mitzvah lolo. And in Mishnah Torah he has it in Perek Tes Halacha Gimel, Oh, al mitzvahs harbe ben kalas ben chamuras. I don't know what the difference between one mitzvah and many mitzvahs, and why he has to make and finds it necessary to mention it every place. I don't know exactly what the issue is. Because as long as no akiras avodah zarah, you have to listen to him. Now, the important thing over here is two things, okay? This we'll see later, Metz Hashem. You get the impression in Rambam that the mitzvah of Elof Tishma'un, whether it's in Divrei Rishus or Divrei Mitzvah, is not different or not that different. It's almost the same as like one part of a sentence. There's no separate din of a separate nemonus or separate heichocha to mevatel mitzvah. Anyone who's a Navi has the right to mitzvah divrei rishus and also mevatel mitzvah. There's no separate din over here, and we'll see in Mitzvah Hashem. We'll see about this later that this is not poshut in Rambam. And then this is also clear that in the din of mevatel mitzvah, it's only lefisha. Lo sheitzave lahasmid teisis or chisaron. It's not permanent, and teisi chisaron that reflects the Ram Shita that you would violate a Navi whose moisif or choseh is violates a law about teis and about tigra. And that's the Rambam in Minyan HaKotzer, Lishmoa mikol Navi shiye b'chol dor v'dor im lo yosef v'lo yiga shnei me'elef tishmon. Okay? Now, just keep in mind, and this is really not an issue, I'll tell it in a very short fashion. The Rambam seems to say that the mitzvah about Teis about Tigra was said by Navi. And that's what he says. Lishmoa mikol Navi sheyeh. B'chol dor v'dor im lo Yosef v'lo yigra. Shenema Elof Tishmon. It's a t'nai. They shouldn't be Moshe and Yigra. In the Akdoma to Pirush HaMishnah, he says, Achelech ol isha shishnabe b'shem Hashem v'yikol v'yazal avodoso v'yom Hashem hoisif ala mitzvahs mitzvah or gora mehem mitzvah mikol mitzvahs shekol loisim sefer Torah ve'in hevdel ben she'osim v'yigol miklois. Doesn't make a difference to the psukim or if it's a Pirush HaMakubal. May Pirush HaMakubal. How it's sofa gilom and miklos going shi'ima she'Hashem omaloi she'ol shnatayim or it's arba shanim or makatzois is kappa whatever he says. V'yechus dova zel nevuah v'yoyim she'Hashem omaloi gam ze yumas v'chenek v'shino v'sheka v'yechus Hashem asher omaloi v'gam ze or lochosh lo'isa moifes. Lefisha Navi shehifli al kol boy olam and moisav nasan v'chulei. And he has no right. Lo b'shmayim lo b'mayam ki kol v'lech adov b'ficho v'vov listen b'ficho v'vovcho v'om b'ficho v'vovcho b'mikros hastuos b'fer or adinim l'mod b'derech ho'iyud. That is by you. No one else can take it away. And then he says clearly there's about Tesif and about Tigra. V'sinu shelo hisif aleim v'lo yigmu mehem v'yomu lo yiseisif v'lo yisigra mehem. Amen. V'fikach omu ala shalom ein novi v'chadish dovo me'ata. And this, he says very clearly, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the Hakdama to Mishnah Torah. You'll find it in Hakdama after the Minyan HaKotzer. He talks about the Taisis and Chisaron of Navi. And he talks about Taisis about Tigla. He says it like this: "V'ama hisira Torah le'seisa v'siga shelo yeh Navi rashoy lechadish dovo v'lo yemesh hakodesh baruch hu tzivah mitzvah le'sofer mitzvahs." That is about Taisis about Tigla, and that's on a Navi. And it's very clear. You say that Torah has no right to change Torah. In Perek Tes Halacha Aleph, Dover Boro Mefurish B'Torah Shehi Mitzvah Medes Olomei Olomei Olomim Ein Lo Lo Shinu LeGilom LeTeisefes. And the Rambam has other reasons in Perek Tes Halacha Aleph and Dalet that it's Le'olmei Ad. Okay. Now, what I meant to mention before, and the truth is, I don't want to just make a very short point. You get the impression, at least in Akdoma to Mishnah Torah, and also in Akdoma to Pirush HaMishnah, that the law of Lo Yosef Tigla was said by Navi. In Mishnah Torah, he doesn't mention Navi, but he mentions Bal Teisah Bal Tigla. He mentions it by Bezdin, Hagodol, Chuzmam. Okay, that's not for our issue now. Okay. Next. We mentioned, the Rambam only here says it's important lefi shor. In other places, the Rambam mentions that the Akira has to feel lefi tzorach shor. And that the Rambam says in the Akdoma to Pirush HaMishnah, he compares it kederech she'osim bezdin b'lo shor, which lefi tzorach, we'll see that later. Avol nase zeis achshav kidei levarer bekach shikrei nevi abal levata tenisayim. It's Seich. It's not stam hoiras novi al dvar Hashem, but it's also tzorich shor, and that's very similar to bezdin mevata dovman atayr. And then he says also, and you say the atayra perek tes halacha gimel. Listen to the lashon. Aval ani akriv hayoim bachutz b'dvar Hashem kidei lahakchish nevi abal. It'll tell stories because there has to be tzorich in the has to be tzorich. But he doesn't mention it here. Okay. Now, there are two things that happen when the Navi says his nevuah. He basically is saying two things. He's saying God told me that there should be a akira lefi shor, and there also is within this nevuah a tzorich shor. So there are two things that are happening. Okay. If you look in Tesis, in Yevomis, is mashma that you don't need tzorich shor. And it's also mashma that a Navi can come and say b'teres gava Navi to mevatel a mitzvah, not al pi dvar Hashem. Which both of these things are absolutely amazing. And we'll see the Tesis, and we'll see both of these things. But there, you need Tzorach Hashor. If it's Dvar Hashem, you don't need Tzorach Hashor. But if it's the Gavra Novi coming and say, oh, we should Mavatal, he's doing it like a Bezdin, there you need Tzorach Hashor. Let's see the cases in Sanhedrin, Pei Testament base, Divya Maschel Elio. The Tamer, Michael Paul Chosom, Voligmine. How could you, what did the Gemara mean in Yevomis that we should learn out Bezdin from Navi? Voligmine. Kiva de Alpiadibo Hoya Misnabe, Ma Shaykh Lemelech Mine, Lavam Mishum Takana de Rabbanon. It's a good question. Shelo Alpiadibo. V'oid, Lomalon, Hocha, Taima Mishum, this Chazek Ben Levius, who are feeling below Navi. Showing the Bezdin Lavo Mishum Migdal Milsa. And what is Bezdin is right? The Migdal Milsa Levato. L'sho. V'yesh loimo. The medak te kosa milishin the Braisa. The Tony Hakol of Fisho. The Mashma Hakol Mibnei Tzorach Hashor. V'afal pi. V'i al pi adibo, if the Gemara is talking al pi adibo, lom litzorach hashor, bein litzorach, bein shelo litzorach, tzorach l'kaim tzivuyav shel mokim, elavadai benovi she'osa midaitoi ko ha'omer b'raisa the ma'iri kro. So it means al pi adibo, there's no difference between Akiris mitzvah and not Akiris mitzvah. And Dvar Hashem is enough. But the Gavra Hanovi has the right to be Oiker Lefi Tzorach without Dvar Hashem. And there's also an Eilov Tishmon to hear the Gavra Hanovi. And that's what Tesa says. V'i al pi adibur lom litzorach hashor, bein litzorach bein shelo litzorach, tzorach l'kaim tzivuyiv shel mokim, elevadai benovi she'osa midaitoi ko omer b'raisa the ma'iko. V'hod the boy hochis chazek hainu mishum dechis chazek min levius same chen olav v'ma shoyim avtiach this eish min hashamayim avtachosai shebeschus l'tfilos ha'terek Eish Mer Shamayim v'yeh Migdal Milsa, and therefore you can listen to him. So Bekitze is you're allowed to listen to a Navi according to the Ram is only two things, and you may need three things. There's Dvar Hashem, Horo Hashor, Akir Horo Hashor, and Lefi Tzorach. Tosis says that if it's Dvar Hashem, then you don't need anything. And if it's the Gavra Nov without Dvar Hashem, then you need Tzorach. And it's mamish like Bezdin. Now, next. Now I want to go over a very important point. If you recall, I said something, which I think is a very important point, because all the other points are, I think, peripheral, because they're true and clear in the other source in the Rambam, but the Rambam doesn't stress it over here. The Rambam, you get the impression that you don't hear us talk about Hashor, whether it's L'tzorach or not L'tzorach. You don't get the impression and everything's Dvar Hashem, there's no difference. And it's only Akira L'Shor and not Le'or Lamad. And we pointed out another place that clearly says there's about Taste and about Tigla. Okay? Now, the question is, if I have a Navi that I'm mechuyev to listen with Eilov Tishmon, is there a difference in my evaluation whether I should listen to him if he's mevatel a mitzvah l'shah or if he tells me dvar l'shus? Looking at the Rambam over here in Minyan HaMitzvos, you get the impression that there's no difference. Because it's all one statement. Vafilu is Elav Tishmon, and Afilu is the Mevatel Mitzvah. What I'd like to point out is that the impression you get from the Rambam in many places is that it's not the same. Let's start like this. And the point is that only a Navi whose kfar his ames nevuasai has the right to be oikedovo. Stam a person who's royal nevuah can come and tell you it's Sivu in Dibirishus, and you evaluate whether he's a Navi, it's Emes or not, whether he gives the Oisem Moifes, and it comes true. Okay? But to Mevatel a mitzvah, he has to come as a Navi Emes before we get started. And I'll show you. Here you don't get the impression it's the same Navi min Naviim. Or I assume that it's a right to be a Navi. Let's see slowly now like this. In Perek Tes of Vilch Yisei Atera Halacha Gimel, came im yoima lonu hanovi shenoida lonu shehu novi. Lavo, what he's with this Gabo, who we know is a Navi, is speaking. It's not that he speaks and says to Mevatel Mitzvah that he's a Navi afterwards, but he has to be clearly a Navi before he makes this statement. Cain in Yoima Lonu Hanovi, Shenoida Lonu Shu Novi, Lavo Achas Mikol Mitzvahs Ramus Batera. Oh, Al mitzvahs halbe ben kalas ben chamurais lefisha mitzvah lishmoa. But Pashtus is before that he has no right to mitzvah. All he has the right to mitzvah is to machazik adas and divirishus before he's noida shu novi, and is a mitzvah lishmoa when he becomes a Novi Ne'emon. And this is also the Mashmos Dvorov in Perek Yud of Hilchos Yisei Atera Halacha Aleph and Beis, Kol Novi Sheyamod Lonu V'yoyim Hashem Sholchoi Eno Tzoroch Lasis Ois Ki Echad Me'oises Moshe Rabbeinu B'chulei Elo Ois Sheloi Sheyom Dvo Masidim Le'ois B'chulei Lefikas Yovo Odom Horoi L'Nevuah B'Meleches Hashem V'lo Yovoi L'Hoisi V'lo Groya Elo Lavoi Es Hashem B'Mitzvahs HaTeira. That's what he's coming for. Ein oimim loy kra lono ayom B'chulei Elo oimim loy Im Novi Ato Emo Dvor Masidim Liyois V'oime B'chulei Im Bo Advorov Kulon, Yeh Beinenu Ne'emon. Uboit kiroi say pomim harbe im nimsu dvor of Ne'emonim Kulon. Ne'emon, there's a Ne'emon the first time. There's a Ne'emon Kulon. How is a Novi Emes? There's a Ne'emon the first time, and if he's Kulon, I don't know how many times Chazoka, not Chazoka. It doesn't tell you how many times. He's a Novi Emes. Kmo shenema b'Shmuel v'yoda kol Yisrael midon v'ad Be'er Sheva ki Ne'emon Shmuel Lenovi Lashem. So I assume Nemon, with the whole title, it's not just a Posher Nemon, but it's a Novi Emes. And it's something which is known and mefusam. The question is, what's the difference between a Novi Nemon and a Novi Emes? And I'm wondering whether only a Novi, it's not even a Nemon's enough, but maybe only a Novi Emes can mevatel divrei Torah. But it's very different from what you see over here in Sefer HaMitzvos, because in Sefer HaMitzvos, Mashim is all the same. Because what does he say you need in order to mevatel mitzvahs? Hanovi shenoida lonu shel novi. What's noida shel novi? Midon ve'ad Be'er-Sheva. Listen to Pirush HaMishnah. Because in Pirush HaMishnah, he says, Kishmuel v'Eliyahu. Only if it's Kishmuel v'Eliyahu, ki mevatel a mitzvah. And you'll see this. So Shmuel v'Eliyahu. It's very interesting. So Shmuel v'Eliyahu, or you see, then it's very interesting because you look over here where it says like this. See, then the Sifri is very interesting. The Sifri says, Elef Tishmon, Afilu Omer L'chol Lavo, Ach B'kumet Samus Batera, L'fisho Shma Loi. Okay? Now, the way the Rama brings it in Mishnah Torah, B'chein Lamadnu in Perik Tes Halacha Gimel, you say that Torah, B'chein Lamadnu B'chomim H'rishonim Mipei Shmuel. It's a Pirush Makubal, and that's the Rama sheet again. That Sam Sifri is a Pirush Makubal. That's what he quotes it here. B'chol im Yom L'chol Novi Avol Divrei Torah Ke'Eliyahu Bahar HaKarmel. Like Eliyahu Bahar HaKarmel. Shmaloi, chutz me'avodah Eliyahu Bar Kamel, because he has to be a Novi Emes, Noida, Mufusam. Now, that's the Lashon in Pirush HaMishnah in Akdomo, Kishnis Ames, Nevuas, Hanovi kfi Yisrael shbianu v'nispar seim midon v'ad Be'er-Sheva ki Shmuel v'Eliyahu v'zulosam yesh li'osei novi l'asei mitzvos ma'asim she'ein shum odom zulosei rashoy l'asei. So I'm not sure. Nispar seim emes noida shul novi, is it all the same or not? But I'm just telling you, you get the impression from Rambam over here that Bitul mitzvah and divrei rishus hainu hach, and both in Pirush Mishnayos and in Mishnah Torah, it's choluk that you only need nemon to mevatel. I mean, for divrei rishus, and for divrei mitzvah, you need a novi emes. I'm going to ask a question now. Let's say, see, I'm just afraid over here what happens. A Novi, a Posher Novi, he's not even a Ne'emon. And he comes and he tells you to mevatel a mitzvah l'fisho. And he gives you no Isser and my face in his time. Do we say that he's a Novi Hasheker? because the Rebbeinu Shalom only uses a Navi, Noideshu Navi, Ki Eliyahu, Ki Shmuel, Shenoide b'Yisrael, or that he's a emes. So just how this works exactly. Okay, I can't say anything about it, but I can hear that there's a problem. It really depends. Let me say it like this. You see, if you remember, we read before that the Naaman, he can only, before he's a Naaman, not to Rishus and not to Mavatal. Here. He says, let's say, okay, it's a kash, it's a question, I'm not sure about it. Okay, now, Eilov Tishmon, what do you mean Eilov Tishmon? I want to show you an interesting twist on the Eilov Tishmon, what the Ram does. You see, you have to just start off and keep this in mind. The Ram Shita is, contrary to the Ramban is chaylik in it, but Kifus in Vayera. The Ram Shita is that all Navi is only through the good services of a Malach. There's no direct intervention. The Rebbeinu doesn't speak to a Navi. It's only Moshe Rabbeinu. Every Navi is Malach. So comes the Rambam in Meira and turns the world upside down because of this. The Rambam in the Nevuchim, in Chelik Beis Perek Lamed Daled, Ze HaKosuv Asher Bo Batera. Listen to this, we know what the Ramban and Chumash does, the other people do. It says in the Torah, Hine Anoichi Sholeach Malach Lefonecha. Matatroin, Shmi Bekilboi, Tifdinim, whether it was before the Egel or what happened after the Egel, comes the Rambam. This is what he does with this pasuk. Hine Anoichi Sholeach Malach Lefonecha. Inyonoi hu mashe hizboye b'mishneh Torah. Shashem Omer b'Moshe b'Maimen Har Sinai. Navi in Maimen Har Sinai, because everything was said in Maimen Har Sinai. The Rambam, not like the Ramban. In Shirish Aleph, he claims that the things were not said in Har Sinai. That's not our issue. Shashem Omer l'Moshe b'Maimen Har Sinai. Novi okim lohem mikerev achehem. Eilov Tishmon, right? I'm just adding that in, but there's a Novi kokumach. Voraya al zeh omroi b'zeh hamalach. This malach, hine anoichi sholech malach, is the malach that through him, the Novi, the new Navi after Moshe Rabbeinu have Nevuah. Mamash, a whole new shot in the pasuk. Ramir, listen to this. Voraya ze omroi b'zeh hamalach. He shoma miponov ushma b'kol. Listen to kol v'malach. Who's he telling you? Because kishmi b'kol. The ain't suffik shezois hatzavo omnom hu lahamoin b'nei adam. So the pashut mensch. V'hamoin b'nei adam lo yiro lehem malach. That's the Ram Shita. That only a royal nevuah can see a malach. And that's what he says in Chelek Beis Perek Mem Gimel, I think at the end, that he says that Hagar and Eshes Manoach and Yosef were not roy for nevuah. That which he saw malach was baskoil. So you understand the Malach has nothing to do with the Hamoin. V'hamoin b'nei Adam lo yira lehem hamalach. V'lo yitzabein. V'lo yasire. Ad sheyitztavu shelo yemru. What's the hamra in Malach? The Malach is not interacting with these people. The omnom inyan ze hama'arma shuhu yis'al hodiyam sheyokim novi lohem sheyavoyu hamalach. The Malach is going to give the novi the nevuah. V'yidaber imoy v'yitzaveu v'yashiru v'yizhiru Hashem mimrei b'Malach means in the what the novi says in the name of Malach, which is Shem Hashem. Or the Hinenu Chisholayach is telling you what's going to be after Moshe Rabbeinu is not here anymore. That it's not directly from Hashem, but it's through Malach. Onu Pshat. V'yizhilnu Hashem mimrei b'Malach haru asher yagiu lonu hanovi dvoroi k'mo shevai b'Mishneh Torah v'omar Elov Tishmon. Elov Tishmon is to listen to this Malach who spoke to this Navi. V'omar v'oish asher lo yishmael divrei dvorei asher yidaber b'shmi. And it's b'shmi because the Malach is speaking b'shmi and the Navi is speaking in the name of the Malach. It's an amazing thing what the Ram did, and that's what Elov Tishmon is all about. Now, let's continue. Next, if a person violates the mitzvah of Elov Tishmon, is chai misvei shamayim. V'hu amro yisale, v'hoyo ish asher lo yishma el divrei hanovi. Asher yidaber b'shmi, anochi edrei shmi imoy, and edrei shmi imoy is misvei shamayim. Ukva hisboyer b'Sanhedrin sheshlosha misosim b'nei shamayim. Ha'oiv al divrei novi. B'novi shov al divrei atzmoi, v'akevish es nevuosai. All three are chai misvei shamayim. V'akol me'omroi asher lo yishma el divrei hanovi. Omroi, omru, the chachmei ha'meseira, omru, kori bei lo yishma, V'lo yishoma, that he didn't listen to his own thing, and lo yashmiya, and he was kovish nevuosai for his boy mishmei mitzvah b'seif Sanhedrin. Okay, come to that seif Sanhedrin. That's Ram the Shitosai that the last parak of Sanhedrin is parak and nechnokim. He switches the clock around. Okay, now. Here, I want to discuss something interesting. First of all, Pashtus of the Rambam here is that even if he decides that God's Torah is so holy and I can't violate God's Torah, the Fisha, he's also Chayv Misvei Shamayim. Because the Ram puts everyone's the same. And the Ram is Mefurish in Akdoma to the Mishnah. He says, Im sivu levatel eze mitzvah mikol mitzvah say, o shetzivu lavo as home and as holis mikol mitzvah lois say chayov lishmoa b'chol devor b'chol oiva al dvorav chayim nisnei shamayim. And it's also, if you look at the mashal of the Olam Shues Atzmo lefi Dimyon Tzadi V'Yosho, it's also very clear. Okay. This I'm not getting involved in, maybe whatever it is. Minchas Chinuch claims, we'll see exactly why, that maybe if you violate a mitzvah, shouldn't be Snei Shamayim. Okay, but say that. This all starts with something else. There is a very strange expression in the Mishnah. When the Mishnah talks about Ho'eva al Divrei Navi, the Mishnah calls it Mevater al Divrei Navi. The Rambam in Mishnah Torah is mashma that there's no peculiar significance to the connotation to these words. Because he says in Perek Tes Halacha Beis, he say the Torah, he says v'cheni tzivonu b'divrei harishus kagoin l'chu l'mokum ploni o al teichu asu l'chom hayoim o al tasu bonu bon hachoyma lonu o al tivnuo mitzvah lishmoa loy v'oiv al dvov chayim misvudei shamayim שנאמר, והויו איש אשר לא ישמע אל דברי הנביא, אשר ידבר בשמי, אנוכי אדרוש מאימו. However, what does it say? It just says they didn't listen. So, Mevater al Divrei Navi, which is mentioned in Mishnah, is a Poshet Oiva al Divrei Navi. There's nothing special. He says, build this wall. He doesn't do it. The Ram doesn't tell you any special formula about what he has to do. He just doesn't listen. However, in Pirush Mishnah, it's not so clear. Because in Pirush Mishnah, in Perek Yud Aleph, Mishnah Hey, Umevater al Divrei Navi, the Ram says, Hu sheyinhag bi'i hakpoda ubezilzol b'tzivui haneviyim. He doesn't look at it if he wants Mekayim Alocha with Chol Patel, Rodiktokel. And that's Zilzul. And that's the Mevater al Divrei Navi. Rashi also interprets that the Kavod of Mevater is Zilzul, but I think he's going a little further. Is that the Navi is nothing. Because Rashi says, of Mevater al Divrei Navi, Hamafkirom. It's hefker, zero. The Ram always says that he doesn't do B'chol Diktokel Platel. Shaloi choshash l'ma she'omer lo Navi. So I would have said, but I'm not sure, that the assumption is that he assumes that the Dvar, this is not Dvar Hashem. It's gibberish. It's his own, the Navi is pontificating, and it doesn't, some chayvus. And here comes the Minchas Chinuch in Parsha Shoftim, in Mitzvah Tov Kuf Tes Zayin Ois Aleph. Al Kain Lule Divrei Hagodol Adonenu Harambam V'Rabbeinu Hava Mechaber nearly Dafka Mevate Kmo Shekasafti Kapirush Rashi the Mafkirom V'Eino Cheshesh V'Azeh Komer B'Gemara Gegoyin Chave de Michya the Omele Hakini V'Lo Shama the Hoye Be'ein of Divri Hanovi Lalag the Loma Yake Oisoi V'Idezeh Efsher the Lohemin B'Dvorov V'Azeh Hoinish Misbedei Shamayim Avo Mitzvahs Hanovi She'enoi Mivater Rak Oiver Machmas Sheyitzoi Tokfoi. He has the Yetzer Hara not to listen to the Navi. Como Shol HaMelech Begilgol over Melchemes HaMolech. Como Shekoz Bekor Eino Bichlal Ze V'Dino Ka'eve HaMitzvah Say that Torah Tziv of Elov Tishmol. The Ram's clear not like this. So there's a whole new concept in Mevatel Divrei Novi, and only that is the Chimish Ram's Mashma. Anytime you violate it, Tishmol, you chay misle Shemayim. For Oiva al mitzvah zol, chay misle Shemayim. That's what he's saying. That's this lashon. He clearly coming to say not like that. Everyone. Now, so there's a chiyuv of lo yishma, lo yishoma, he doesn't listen to himself. And there's a mitzvah, there's a chiyuv for lo yashmir. So l'cheira, one could have brought a very simple proof to the Rambam's approach that Oiva al Divrei Novi does not require mevater or mafkirom, okay? The Bonisham Oiva al Divrei Atzmoi, he's only chaye because he thinks he's an idiot. Or he thinks that what he knows that it's some, so what's the issue? So the Chayra, the Ram could have learned from the fact that it's Oiva al Divrei Atzmoi, there's the Chiyuv, so the Chayra you don't need Mevater. That's what I was wondering. However, you can flip the whole discussion. Ask yourself, I remember the Rav discussing these issues when we learned Hanechnokim. The question is, what do you need three categories over here? Isn't every Oiva al Divrei Atzmoi, Oiva al Divrei Novi? What do you need another category for? So what the Rav said is basically set things up. But what's negay over here, he said that the chefsa of Nevuah is nifs v'sayim, an all expression. And that you'll find, just bring eyes to this, Rashi and the Chemia, Divrei Maskal Neviim, Rashi says, Ba'alei loshoin, k'mo borei nifs v'sayim. It's verbal communication. In Aderes Elio and Dvorim, Lamed Beis Zayin, V'novi hu miloshen nifs v'sayim, sho'im al pi adibo, which goes l'sati dvorai beficho, ומכאן אתה יודע היכן הנביאים וכולי. So then there's a Havamina that the Oval Divrei Atzmai, that what he did was not a stira to Nivsvos Hayim, maybe it's not Chayiv Misa. Kamash Mon it is. But you have to take it to another step. If you accept this, what do you need a separate din of Kovish Nevuah? The Rebbeinu should have said, Yanko, say the Nevuah. And he does not. He's a Kovish Nevuah. It's the Chayiv al Divrei Atzmai. So what's this Chadesh? They need a new din of Kovish Nevuah. Every Kovish Nevuah is over al Divrei Atzmai. See here, a Chacham will come. Say, you know what Rabbi say? This is a riot Chasadi going that the Eben Ezra quotes in the beginning of Yoina. Because in Yoina, I'm going to say it over a little differently. It doesn't record in Yoina that there was Nevuah to Yoina and Yoina ran away. It just says the Yoina ran Tarshisha. So the pshat is that Yoina held that we know Nevuah Chutzlaretz. He's waiting and petrified Nevuah from the Rebbeinu Shalom that he'll have to say something about Ninveh, and he doesn't want it. So the Kovish Nevuah, so he causes the Nevuah not to come. That's the pshat in the Gemara. Ki Yoina ben Amitai. Not someone who received the Nevuah, but someone who's trying to make sure the Nevuah doesn't come. It's a very novel pshat, okay? You don't get that impression of the Rambam. So I was wondering, maybe, should take the Rav's vault one step further and say, okay, this, you see, in the case of Oival Divrei Atzmai, the Nevuah was said to be given over, okay, and said to be said. And just as far as he's concerned, the saying is meaningless because he knows it, okay? In Kovish Nevuah say, or that the Chefsa from Nevuah was never said to be said. This Sivui of Yankel say was never said to be said over. Only the Chefsa Nevuah was said to be said over. Oh, but the Tzivui or the Kovish Nevuah say that was never said. So maybe there's no Chiyuv b'dei Shamayim or such a thing. Or that Oival Divrei Atzmai or that the Chefsa Nevuah was needed to be said. But just as far as he's concerned, it's irrelevant. But here, that the Chefsa from Nevuah, from to say, was not needed to be said. So maybe there's no over Divrei Nova. Because Eil Tishmon, it's mufka from the Eil Tishmon. So that's what I would suggest. Now, okay, next. Now, sorry, don't read much further here. Next mitzvah, Kuf Ayin Gimel, a mitzvah asholish v'shiva mumeya. He shetzivonu limnos oleinu Melech miYisrael. A mitzvah of Minui Melech. Let's just read it, get the idea, and then we'll just see. Limnos Melech, Yikapetz Umasenu. So Yikapetz Umasenu doesn't make any sense. It almost sounds like the Mashiach's coming to Makapetz Nitchei Yisrael, okay? Kapach, First of all, it's Melech mi Yisrael. Okay, it's not from Ish Nochi. Then he says, Yikabitz kol Mosenu, sheyached es divrosenu. You understand, it means there's one spokesman. The king is the spokes of everyone. There's no, he has what to say, and Yen has what to say. Everyone, certainly, you're going to have 3 opinions and 2 people in every room. But the word, the voice of the people is the Melech. It has to do with the mitzvah. V'yani Geni. And that's Ibn Tibin. Kapach v'yanig es kulano. He is, everyone has to listen to. It's not this one and not that one. V'omo yisala, same tosam alecha melech. Echil v'same tosam alecha melech is not only the minui, but to understand that he is the lone voice of Bnei Yisrael, and everyone should listen to him. Okay, and that goes into of the same Tosim Alecha Melech. We'll see about this more mitzvah next week. Ukvar kodem lono l'shonim b'sifri sholish mitzvos nitztavu Yisrael b'ksis l'oretz limnos lehem melech limnos lehem beis habechira lahachizar shalamod. So it means maybe same Tosum is not a mitzvah. And we know that it's a mitzvah. Maybe it's only secret devorim. That if you want to do this, we'll see. The etzim is, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more. The comes Rav Sadia going in Perich Chof Aleph, his Sefer Mitzvos, on the 201. Page 201. If they need it, but there's no mitzvah per se. Then there's something missing in the Ksav Yad. Lo yiyeh v'chu is something or a few other things. Yamlichu aleim melech miYisrael. V'she'om asayim tosim alecha melech. If they want, or if they need it. Then there's a new layer over here. Part of the etzem minui is that he's our voice, and we listen to him. Okay, and it's more than that. Uba beferish sha'amroi same tosav alecha melech shitei emoso alecha. Part of the mitzvah from same tosav is the minui is the emo. Without the emo, you're not mekayim the mitzvah til chasa. Sheye omein boy me'akovoid la'gdula v'hamaylo atachlis achoy she'en l'maylo mimeno. And not only that, the din of murder b'malchus is also part of same tosav, and that's what he says at the end. Moshe Omra was saying al atzmo kol ish asher yamres picho yumos v'chol mor b'malchus yemishiyah d'momoy muter lemelech shehukam. So Mitzvah Shem will pick up this. It's just a short outline of what the mitzvah is. We have to understand what happened to David HaMelech at the time of Abigail and the sugya in Yudalid in Megillah. And Mitzvah Shem, and have a nice week.